The desert wind howled like a mournful engine, kicking up dust that clung to the black leather vests of the Iron Promise riders gathered under the relentless Arizona sun. It was a closed funeral, the kind where outsiders knew better than to linger. 50 hardened men and women, their faces etched with grief and grit, forming a silent wall around the polished oak casket at the edge of the old cemetery. Dean Foster lay inside, 52 years old, his life cut short in a brutal ambush on a rain-slicked highway 2 nights prior. The club had lost one of their own, a brother who'd ridden with them through wars both foreign and domestic. His hands still calloused from wrenching engines and pulling triggers in forgotten battles. No one spoke of the details aloud. Whispers carried enough. The rival crew from the east, a deal gone sour, bullets ripping through the night like accusations. Jax Harlan, Dean's closest friend and the club's enforcer, stood at the head of the procession, his broad shoulders squared against the weight of unspoken regrets. At 48, Jax carried his own scars, a jagged line across his jaw from a roadside IED in Iraq, and deeper ones from the promises he'd made to brothers like Dean. They'd sworn an oath under the club's Iron Cross emblem, loyalty until the end, family forged in fire, not blood. But today, that oath felt like a chain. The air smelled of fresh earth and motor oil, the distant rumble of idling Harleys, a low dirge that vibrated through the ground. A single American flag draped the casket, fluttering faintly, as if even it mourned the man who'd defended it in shadows no one else saw. As the officiant, a grizzled veteran chaplain with a voice like gravel, began the eulogy, his words cut through the tension. Dean Foster wasn't just a rider. He was the promise we all chase. In a world that breaks its word, he kept his. Nods rippled through the crowd, but Jax's eyes scanned the perimeter, ever vigilant. That's when he saw her, a small figure slipping through the chain-link fence at the cemetery's edge, her pink sneakers kicking up pebbles. She couldn't have been more than 7, her blonde hair tied in uneven pigtails, clutching a crumpled tissue in one hand and something pink in the other. The girl moved with a quiet determination that didn't belong in a place of death, her wide eyes fixed on the casket like it held a secret only she knew. The chaplain faltered mid-sentence as heads turned. Murmurs rose like exhaust fumes. "Who the hell is that?" Someone growled from the back. Jax stepped forward, his boots crunching gravel, but before he could reach her, the girl had woven through the legs of the mourners. She was tiny, almost swallowed by the sea of leather and denim, yet she didn't hesitate. Climbing onto a nearby stool, left for the flower arrangements, she balanced precariously and leaned over the casket. Her small hands trembled as she untied the pink ribbon, a delicate satin thing, faded but intact, and draped it gently across the lid, right over the flag's stripes. It fluttered there like a fragile banner of innocence amid the chrome and steel of their world. The club froze. A gasp escaped from the front row, where Dean's sister Mara clutched her rosary beads. Pink ribbons. That was Dean's quiet ritual, something only a few knew about. Back in the day, when the club threw rare community rides for the local kids, Dean would show up with those ribbons, tying them into the hair of the little ones celebrating birthdays. He'd grin, that rare, boyish smile, the one that softened his weathered face, and say, "Every promise starts small, like this." It was his way of reminding them all that beneath the tattoos and the thunder of engines, there was still room for something pure. But that was years ago, before the ambushes and the betrayals hardened him further. The girl stepped back, her task done, and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Jax knelt beside her, his voice a low rumble softened by confusion. "Hey, kid, you know my brother Dean?" She nodded slowly, her lower lip quivering, but she didn't cry. Instead, she reached into the collar of her faded sundress and pulled out a thin, silver chain. At its end dangled a locket, heart-shaped and tarnished. With deliberate care, she unclasped it, revealing 2 small photos inside. The first showed Dean, much younger, maybe in his 20s, his hair wild and unscarred, cradling a newborn in a hospital bed surrounded by beeping machines. The infant's tiny hand gripped his finger, and Dean's eyes shone with a fierce, protective light. The second photo was of a woman, mid-30s, smiling softly beside a toddler version of the girl herself. The club erupted in hushed shock. Mara pushed forward, her face paling. That's Elena, Dean's old flame from Phoenix. They split years ago, said it was too dangerous, the life we lead. Whispers turned to questions, eyes darting between the Locket and the Casket. Jax's mind raced back to fragments of conversations, late-night rides, where Dean would stare into the fire and mutter about a promise he'd buried deep. He never said. A kid. The girl, Emily, she whispered her name, looked up at them all, her voice steady despite the tears. Mommy said Daddy was a hero who had to stay away to keep us safe. She got sick last month, and before she went she gave me this. Said to find him and tie the ribbon, like he promised her he'd do for me every year. The weight of it settled over the gathering like dust after a storm. Dean Foster, the unbreakable rider, had carried a secret family, a hidden thread of tenderness woven into his iron resolve. The ambush that took him wasn't just a loss for the club. It was the unraveling of a life built on silent sacrifices. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the graves, Jax placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "You're with us now, kid. That's a promise." The Harleys revved in agreement, their roar a vow echoing into the horizon, one that would bind them all in the days to come, chasing justice for the fallen and honoring the bonds that outlasted even death. But as the mourners began to disperse, a single question hung in the air. Who had orchestrated the ambush that stole Dean from the daughter he never claimed? The club wouldn't rest until they knew, and until Emily's ribbon became the spark for a redemption none of them saw coming. The sun hung low over the Arizona horizon, painting the cemetery in strokes of burnt orange and shadow as the Iron Promise riders lingered in clusters, their voices a low rumble like idling engines after a shutdown. Jax Harlan watched Emily from across the gravel lot, the girl now perched on a weathered bench beside Mara, who had wrapped her in a spare club jacket too big for her frame. The pink ribbon still fluttered on Dean's casket, a defiant splash of colour against the flag's sombre reds and whites, catching the fading light like a whispered secret refusing to fade. The air carried the sharp tang of cooling metal from the Harleys lined up in formation, their chrome gleaming dully, while the scent of sagebrush mingled with the faint, acrid bite of gunpowder residue that seemed to cling to everything since the ambush. Jax's boots crunched as he approached the core group, 5 of the club's elders, including old-timer Silas, whose white beard framed a face mapped with decades of road dust and regrets. They stood around a portable cooler, passing a flask of something strong enough to burn away the day's grief. "That kid," Silas muttered, his voice gravelly from years of shouting over engine roars, "changes everything. Dean kept her hidden for a reason. The life's got teeth, Jax, sharp ones." Jax nodded, his jaw tightening under the scar that pulled at his skin like a constant reminder. He'd seen Dean's eyes light up in rare moments, talking about loose ends from Phoenix, but never pieced it together. Eleanor, Dean had loved her fierce, back when they were both young and the club was more about freedom than survival. But the rides turned rough, rivals circling like vultures, and Dean walked away to shield them from the fallout. A promise unspoken, buried under layers of leather and loyalty. Now, with Emily's locket laid bare, that promise demanded reckoning. "She stays with us," Jax said flatly, his words cutting through the murmurs. "Dean's blood, our blood now." The group fell silent as Mara joined them, Emily trailing behind like a shadow in oversized denim. The girl's eyes, red-rimmed but clear, scanned the faces, strangers forged into family by a single ribbon. "He used to send cards," she said softly, her voice carrying on the breeze. Mommy kept them in a box, pink ones with ribbons drawn on. Said Daddy couldn't come, but he was watching. Mara knelt, pulling Emily close, her own tears tracing lines through the dust on her cheeks. The club had lost brothers before, but this was a fracture in the iron core, a reminder that their world of thunder and oaths couldn't outrun the quiet pull of what was left behind. As dusk settled, the riders fired up their bikes, the convoy forming a protective phalanx around Mara's truck, where Emily rode shotgun. Jax led the pack, his throttle a steady growl as they carved through the winding roads toward the club's compound, a sprawling ranch on the outskirts of town, ringed by barbed wire and guarded by floodlights that pierced the night like accusatory beams. The journey was solemn, headlights slicing the twilight, the wind whipping at vests embroidered with the Iron Cross, a promise etched in thread and ink. Jax's mind raced ahead, replaying the chaplain's words and the Locket's image, Dean in that hospital, vulnerable, holding life in his arms. What ambush had claimed him? Whispers from the scene pointed to the Shadow Reapers, a rival outfit pushing into Iron Promise territory. Hungry for the smuggling routes Dean had guarded like a vault. Back at the compound, the gates creaked open under the weight of history, revealing a courtyard alive with the hum of generators and the flicker of bonfires. Women from the club, tough souls like Lena, a former medic with tattoos of medical crosses, gathered blankets and hot cocoa, turning the space into an impromptu haven. Emily stepped out, wide-eyed at the sea of leather and laughter laced with sorrow. But Jax caught her hand. "This is home now, kid. We keep promises here." She nodded, clutching the locket as if it were the key to unlocking the man they'd all mourned differently. Inside the main hall, paneled walls lined with photos of fallen riders stared down like silent witnesses. The elders convened around a scarred oak table, maps unfurled like battle plans from Dean's war days. Silas tapped a spot on the highway where the ambush hit, a desolate stretch flanked by canyons, rain turning the asphalt to a mirror of deceit. 2 nights back, Dean was solo on that run, supposed to link up with the shipment from Tucson. Witnesses, truckers, saw taillights, then flashes. No bodies recovered clean, just his bike twisted in the ditch, blood on the leather. Jax leaned in, the scent of stale coffee and cigar smoke thickening the air. Reapers, they've been sniffing around since that deal soured last spring. But why Dean? He wasn't the weak link. Mara entered, her face set like flint. "Because of her," she said, nodding toward Emily, now dozing in a corner armchair under Lena's watch. "If they knew about the kid..." Leverage. Dean must have caught wind, tried to tie up loose ends. The room tensed, the fire crackling in the hearth casting shadows that danced like ghosts of old oaths. Jax's fist clenched on the table, knuckles whitening. Dean had sacrificed visibility for safety, but secrets had a way of surfacing, especially when bullets flew. The club had codes, no innocents touched, but the Reapers played dirtier. Corruption, seeping from crooked badges to boardroom deals. As midnight approached, Jax stepped outside, the cool night air a balm against the heat of anger. Stars wheeled overhead, indifferent witnesses to the vows being renewed. Emily stirred, padding out in socks, her small form silhouetted against the firelight. "Will you find who hurt Daddy?" she asked, voice steady in the quiet. Jax crouched, meeting her gaze. "Yeah, kid. For him. For you. That's the promise." She slipped the locket chain over her head, letting it rest against his palm, a weight of trust heavier than any engine block. In the hours that followed, scouts rode out under cover of darkness, tracing leads to a Reaper safehouse in the hills. Whispers of a mole within the club's ranks surfaced, a betrayal that twisted the knife deeper. Jax knew the ride ahead would test every bond, forcing choices between vengeance and the moral line Dean had walked so carefully. Emily's arrival wasn't just grief, it was ignition, a spark in the dry tinder of their world, promising redemption through the storm, or ruin if they faltered. The engines revved in the distance, a call to arms, as the iron promise prepared to chase shadows into the dawn. The first light of dawn crept over the jagged hills like a hesitant scout, gilding the barbed wire around the iron promise compound in a soft, deceptive glow. Jax Harlan hadn't slept. His body ached from the night's vigil, slumped in a worn armchair by the window of the main hall, where the scent of cooling embers from the bonfire mingled with the faint metallic tang of gun oil from the scouts' returned gear. Outside, the Harleys stood in silent ranks, dew beading on their tanks like unshed tears, while the distant call of a coyote echoed the unresolved howl of grief. Emily slept soundly in a back room, tucked under quilts sewn by club widows. Her locket now safely on the table beside Jack's, a talisman of secrets that demanded unraveling. Silas shuffled in at first light, his boots scraping the wooden floor like a warning rasp. The old rider carried a thermos of black coffee, strong enough to strip paint, and a folder of grainy photos tucked under his arm. "Scouts hit pay dirt," he said, voice low, as he slid into the chair opposite Jack's. "Reaper outpost in the canyons, about 20 miles east. They were burning evidence, tires, manifests, but one of our boys snagged this before bolting." He flipped open the folder, revealing snapshots of shadowed figures around a fire pit, leather cuts marked with the Reaper's skull emblem, faces obscured but postures screaming arrogance. In the center, a man with a salt and pepper beard leaned over a map, his finger tracing the same highway stretch where Dean's bike had been found mangled. Jax's eyes narrowed, the scar on his jaw pulling tight as he absorbed the details. The air in the hall felt thicker now, charged with the residue of last night's revelations. Dean's hidden life wasn't just a personal ghost. It was a vulnerability the Reapers had exploited, turning a father's quiet protection into a fatal snare. "That one's Vance," Jax murmured, tapping a photo where the bearded man held a burner phone to his ear. "Dean's old contact from the smuggling days. Went rogue after that bust in 18. If he's pulling strings, it's personal. Dean shut him out when Elena came into the picture." Silas nodded, pouring coffee that steamed like battlefield fog. The promise Dean had made to walk away from the dangers for his family's sake now echoed in every shadow, a moral anchor pulling the club toward justice, not blind rage. As the compound stirred, women stoking the kitchen fires, the clatter of pans promising a communal breakfast of eggs and bacon fried in cast iron, Jax felt the weight of eyes on him. Lena approached, wiping her hands on a flour-dusted apron, her medic's gaze sharp. "Emily's up, asking for you. Kid's tougher than she looks, but that locket, it's eating at her." Jax rose, the chair creaking under his bulk, and followed her to the back room. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains, casting patterns on the walls like fractured memories. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, legs swinging, her pigtails refreshed, but her expression distant, as if peering into the photos within her keepsake. "Morning, kid," Jack said, easing onto the bed's corner. The mattress dipped under him, springs groaning softly. She looked up, clutching a mug of cocoa that Lena had left, its chocolate warmth curling steam toward the ceiling. "You said you'd find them, the ones who hurt Daddy." Her words hung there, innocent yet edged with the steel Jax recognized from Dean's own resolve. He nodded, choosing his response like a rider picking his line through a storm. "We will, but it's not just about payback. Your dad built this club on keeping word, honor over haste. We ride for truth first." Emily tilted her head, the locket glinting at her neck. "Mommy said he promised to tie ribbons forever, even if he couldn't be there." The simplicity of it pierced Jax, a reminder that redemption wasn't forged in chrome, but in the small, steadfast acts that outlasted bullets. By mid-morning, the core riders gathered in the courtyard, the sun climbing to bake the earth into a haze of heat waves. Harleys idled in a loose circle, their engines a throaty chorus underscoring the briefing. Mara stood beside Jax, her presence a bridge between blood family and chosen kin, while Silas projected the photos onto a makeshift screen rigged from an old bedsheet. Vance and his crew crossed lines, Silas growled, pointing to a blurred image of crates stamped with illicit markings. They're muscling into our routes, but the ambush. Timed too perfect, someone tipped them. Knew Dean was riding solo. Murmurs rippled through the group, leather shifting like whispers of doubt. Jack scanned the faces, brothers he'd bled with, sisters who'd patched wounds under fire. Betrayal's shadow loomed, testing loyalties like acid on metal. Emily watched from the porch, Lena's arm around her shoulders, the girl's eyes wide but unblinking. The pink ribbon from the funeral had been pinned to her jacket now, a badge of inheritance. As Jax outlined the plan, a daylight recon to Vance's outpost, no guns drawn unless provoked, the air thickened with tension. This wasn't war. It was a pursuit of moral clarity, peeling back layers of corruption that had festered since Dean's war days. Whispers of crooked lawmen in the Reaper's pocket surfaced, badges bought with blood money, turning justice into a joke. Jax's voice cut through, "We ride clean, for Dean's promise, to her." He nodded toward Emily, and a collective resolve hardened the group, engines revving in unison as if sealing the vow. The convoy rolled out under a sky streaked with high clouds, dust plumes trailing like battle flags. Jax led, wind tearing at his vest, the road unfolding in a ribbon of asphalt that mirrored the one Emily had tied. Miles blurred, cacti blurring into sentinels, the horizon a promise of confrontation. At the canyon's edge, they dismounted, boots silent on red rock as they crested a ridge. Below, the Reaper camp sprawled, tents sagging under the heat, guards pacing with rifles slung low. Vance was there, barking orders, oblivious to the eyes upon them. Jax's hand rested on his handlebars, not his sidearm, the internal battle raging. Vengeance tempted, but Dean's legacy demanded integrity. A radio crackled in Jax's earpiece, Silas spotting movement, a figure slipping from the camp toward a hidden trail. "Runner!" Silas hissed. "Could be our mole." Heart pounding like a piston, Jax signaled the pursuit, the group fanning out with the grace of shadows. The chase wound through scrub brush, thorns snagging at denim, the sun beating down like judgment. They cornered the man, a wiry prospect from their own ranks, face pale with guilt, near a dry wash. "It was for the kid," he stammered, dropping to his knees, dust exploding around him. "Vance knew about Emily, threatened to drag her into it unless I fed him Dean's route." The confession landed like a gut punch, betrayal's sting sharper than any blade. Jax hauled him up, grip iron but eyes searching for redemption's spark. "You broke the promise, but you can mend it, testify, lead us to Vance clean." The man nodded, tears cutting tracks through grime, a fragile bridge toward absolution. As the sun peaked, casting the canyon in harsh relief, Jax radioed back. Intel secured, no blood spilled. The ride home carried a new weight, justice unfolding not in thunder, but in the quiet unraveling of lies. Emily waited at the gates, her small wave a beacon, reminding them all that some promises once kept forged families unbreakable. Yet deeper shadows lingered. Vance's knowledge of Emily meant the storm was far from over, pulling the iron promise toward a reckoning that would test every scar and oath. The midday sun scorched the canyon walls as the Iron Promise convoy retraced its path, engines growling low like restrained thunder through the winding trails back to the compound. Jax Harlan rode point, his grip steady on the handlebars, but his mind churned with the mole's confession, a bitter fuel that burned hotter than the desert heat, rising in waves from the asphalt. Dust devils swirled in their wake, carrying the faint, earthy scent of creosote bushes crushed under tires, while the captive prospect slumped in the sidecar of Silas's rig, wrists bound with zip ties that bit into his skin like accusations. The man's face, streaked with sweat and regret, pressed against the mesh, eyes darting as if seeking escape from the judgment of brothers he'd betrayed. Emily's locket weighed heavy in Jax's pocket, a small silver pulse against his thigh, reminding him that this pursuit wasn't vengeance alone. It was the fulfillment of a father's hidden vow, a thread of loyalty pulling them through the moral fog. Back at the compound, the gates swung open with a metallic groan, admitting the riders into the courtyard where shadows pooled under the overhangs like unspoken doubts. Women and prospects gathered at the edges, their faces a mix of curiosity and wariness, the air thick with the aroma of simmering chili from the communal pot, spices sharp enough to cut through the tension. Lena met Jax at the bike, her hand steady as she helped unload the prisoner, her medic's touch firm but devoid of pity. "Hall!" Jax ordered curtly, his voice echoing off the adobe walls. The group herded the man inside, boots thudding on the worn planks, past walls adorned with faded patches from rides long past, emblems of unity now tainted by fracture. In the main hall, the scarred oak table became a makeshift tribunal, lit by shafts of sunlight slicing through half-drawn blinds like interrogators' beams. Silas chained the prospect to a chair, the links clinking softly, while Mara stood sentinel by the door, her arms crossed over the club jacket that still bore the faint crease from Emily's hug. The girl herself hovered in the doorway, peeking from behind Lena's legs, her pink ribbon pinned like a medal to her sundress. Jax paced, the floorboards creaking under his weight, each step a measured beat in the rhythm of reckoning. "Talk," he said, stopping before the man, whose name, Ricky, suddenly felt like a curse. Everything. How Vance knew about the kid. Ricky swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing like a piston seizing. The room smelled of aged leather and the faint, oily residue from cleaning kits scattered nearby, tools for battles both old and new. "It started months back," he rasped, voice cracking under the strain. "Vance cornered me after a bar run in Tucson. Knew I'd been skimming for debts, gambling, you know. Said he'd bury me unless I watched Dean. Then he dug up dirt. Some old hospital record leaked from a crooked clerk. The baby in the NICU, Elena's girl. He laughed, called it Dean's weak spot, promised to leave her be if I fed roots. I thought, one tip and it's done. His eyes flicked to Emily, shame twisting his features, but the ambush, that was Vance going off script. Dean must have smelled it, tried to double back. Murmurs rippled through the elders, leather vests shifting like waves in a storm-tossed sea. Silas leaned forward, his white beard catching the light, knuckles rapping the table like a gavel. "And the Reapers play, pushing into our lanes. It's not just turf. Vance wants the whole operation, the shipments Dean locked down with those war contacts." Jax's scar throbbed, a phantom echo of explosions from distant sands, where promises made in foxholes had forged the club's iron core. Betrayal here cut deeper, unraveling the family chosen in blood and brotherhood. Emily stepped closer, her small hand slipping into Jax's, cool against his calluses. "Did Daddy know?" she whispered, her voice a fragile anchor amid the rising tide of anger. The question hung, pulling confessions from the shadows. Ricky nodded, tears carving paths through the grime on his face. "He confronted me 2 days before, said if I crossed the line he'd handle it himself, quiet, no club drag." But Vance moved fast. Jax knelt, meeting the man's gaze, the moral divide stark in the dim light. Punishment tempted, swift and final, but Dean's way demanded redemption's harder path. "You get one shot to fix this," Jax said, his tone low, edged with the gravel of restraint. "Ride with us to Vance, draw him out, no games, prove you're more than the break." Ricky's shoulders sagged. A nod sealing the fragile pact, a chance at absolution, born of the same loyalty that bound them all. As the afternoon waned, the compound buzzed with preparation. Scouts checking maps under the hum of fluorescent lights, the clatter of tools sharpening focus. Mara pulled Jax aside in the kitchen, where the scent of cooling bread mingled with the tension. "Emily's asking about her mom, Elena's sickness. We need to shield her, but truth's the only promise that'll hold." Jax glanced at the girl outside, chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk, her laughter a rare spark against the encroaching night. The Locket's photos burned in his memory, Dean's young face, fierce with unspoken oaths. This betrayal exposed not just roots, but the club's underbelly. Corruption threading from Reaper hands to local enforcers, badges turned blind by payoffs. Justice here meant peeling it back, layer by layer, without becoming the monsters they hunted. By evening, the plan solidified around the fire pit, flames crackling like whispers of resolve. Silas outlined the meet, a neutral pull-off on the old highway, under the cover of a harvest moon rising fat and silver. Ricky would signal Vance, baiting with false cargo intel, while the Iron Promise flanked from the ridges, eyes sharp, triggers cold. Emily approached, clutching a drawing she'd scribbled, a ribbon-wrapped bike under starry skies. "For Daddy's ride," she said, handing it to Jax. He took it, the paper crinkling softly, a child's vision of honor cutting through the grit. "We'll make it right," he promised, the words echoing Dean's buried vows. The night deepened, stars pricking the velvet sky like distant promises waiting to be claimed. Engines idled in the distance, a low symphony building toward confrontation. Yet as Jax watched Emily drift to sleep under Lena's watchful eye, he felt the true weight. This path tested not just loyalty, but the soul of what the club stood for. Integrity amid chaos, family woven from scars and second chances. Vance's shadow loomed larger, his knowledge of Emily a threat that demanded more than a ride. It called for a stand, moral and unyielding, to honor the fallen and protect the innocent thread tying them all. If this story is touching your heart, hit that like button below. The harvest moon hung bloated and pale over the Arizona Badlands, its silvery light spilling across the cracked asphalt of the old highway like spilled mercury, turning the landscape into a monochrome etching of scrub and stone. Jax Harlan throttled down as the Iron Promise convoy crested the final rise, engines purring low to mask their approach, the vibration humming through his bones like a held breath. The air was crisp with the chill of elevation, carrying the dry, resinous bite of juniper and the faint, underlying sharpness of distant rain that never quite fell. Behind him, the riders fanned out in a disciplined V, Silas on his flank, Mara bringing up the rear with a few scouts, while Ricky rode solo in the center, his borrowed bike, a reluctant steed under the weight of his redemption. Emily had stayed back at the compound, under Lena's guard, her drawing tucked into Jax's vest like a talisman, its childish lines a reminder that this night's work was for more than settling scores. It was the mending of fractured oaths. Jax's eyes scanned the pull-off ahead, a desolate overlook flanked by sheer canyon walls, where rusted picnic tables stood like forgotten sentinels, their surfaces etched with initials from lovers long gone. Headlights off, the group coasted to a halt in the shadows of a boulder outcrop, boots hitting gravel with muffled crunches as they dismounted. The moon's glow caught the iron cross patches on their vests, glinting like accusations in the quiet. Silas handed out earpieces, the plastic cool against sweat-damp skin, while Mara checked her sidearm, not drawn but ready, a silent vow to the moral line they walked. "Signals set," Silas murmured, his breath fogging faintly in the cooling night. "Ricky calls Vance in 5. We hold position, eyes only until he shows." Jax nodded, the scar on his jaw itching under the tension, his mind flashing to Dean's Locket photo. That young father gripping a tiny hand, promising safety in a world that devoured the unguarded. Ricky lingered by his bike, fiddling with the burner phone, his face pallid under the moonlight, shadows pooling in the hollows of his cheeks like pools of doubt. The wind whispered through the canyons, carrying echoes of coyote calls that twisted into something almost human. Warnings or laments. It was hard to tell. "This fixes it, right?" he asked Jax, voice barely above the rustle of sagebrush. Jax met his gaze, the weight of judgment tempered by the club's code, second chances for those who turned back from the edge. "It does if you mean it." Dean walked away from worse to keep his word. "Now you ride that path." Ricky swallowed, nodding as he punched in the number, the phone's glow illuminating his trembling fingers. The call connected with a faint click, and his words tumbled out, fabricated cargo details, a lure painted in lies to draw Vance from his lair. Minutes stretched like taffy, the group hunkered in silence, breaths sinking with the night's pulse. Jax crouched behind a low ridge, peering through binoculars at the empty road below, the lenses cool and fogging slightly from his heat. Memories surfaced unbidden, rides with Dean through these same canyons, engines roaring defiance against the isolation, sharing stories of foxholes where promises were the only currency that mattered. Dean had spoken once, firelit and half-drunk, of a love he'd left to shield it from the club's shadows. Elena's smile, the baby's cry in that sterile room. Jax had chalked it up to road poetry, but now it burned clear. Sacrifice as the true mark of honor, not the thunder of bikes or the flash of steel. The mole's betrayal had cracked that foundation, but tonight could seal it anew, weaving Emily into the family's iron thread. Headlights pierced the darkness first, a single set, approaching slow from the east. Gravel spitting under tires like suppressed gunfire. Vance's truck, black and battered, rolled into the pull-off, its engine cutting with a final cough that echoed off the walls. The bearded man stepped out, flanked by two shadows, Reaper enforcers, their silhouettes bulky with hidden menace, scanning the emptiness with the wariness of predators sensing a trap. Ricky straightened, stepping into the moonlight, his voice steady as he called out, "Vance, like I said, cargo's light, but it's yours if the price holds." The words hung, bait on a hook, and Vance approached, his boots deliberate on the dirt, a smirk curling under the salt and pepper beard that Jax recognized from those old photos. The air thickened, charged with the scent of exhaust and unspoken threats. The moon casting long shadows that danced like spectres of old grudges. From their vantage, the Iron Promise watched, hearts pounding in rhythm with the distant thrum of a lone engine idling far below. Backup, perhaps, or just the night's deceit. Jax's radio crackled softly. Mara's whisper confirming positions, her tone laced with the steel of a sister avenging blood. Vance circled Ricky, his voice a low drawl carrying on the wind. "Dean's girl. Sweet leverage, huh? Thought it'd break the old man, make him fold on the roots. Didn't count on him going down quiet." The confession slithered out, casual as trading smokes, but it ignited something primal in Jax, a surge of protective fury for the child who'd tied that ribbon, for the father who'd buried his heart to keep it beating. Ricky played his part, feigning nerves, edging closer to draw them in. But Vance's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering like a match in the dark. Tension coiled tighter as one enforcer peeled off, circling toward the boulders, too close to their hide. Silas's hand signaled hold, but Jax's pulse raced, the moral calculus shifting, expose now and risk chaos, or wait and let truth unfold clean. The wind picked up, whipping dust into veils that blurred the scene, and Ricky stumbled a step, his cover cracking under pressure. "They're here!" he blurted, voice pitching high, pointing toward the ridge. Vance spun, barking orders, his hand dropping to his belt as moonlight glinted off drawn metal. Chaos erupted in heartbeats, shouts echoing, engines firing to life below. But Jax rose, stepping into view, hands open, voice booming like a command from the old wars. "Stand down, Vance. This ends with words, not lead. Dean's promise was bigger than your game." The standoff stretched, shadows merging under the moon's indifferent gaze, the canyon walls amplifying every breath, every shift of leather. Vance laughed, a hollow bark that didn't reach his eyes. But in that pause, Jax saw the fracture, a man chasing power, blind to the loyalty that bound the iron promise. Ricky backed toward them, allegiance shifting like sand, and the enforcers hesitated, rifles half raised. Mara flanked from the side, her presence a quiet force, while Silas covered the rear. No shots rang out. Instead, the weight of exposure hung heavy, the mole's turn, the leaked records. The ambush's architect laid bare. Vance's smirk faded, replaced by calculation, as Jax pressed forward. "The kid's under our wing now. You touch that thread, and every oath we've sworn comes down on you. Walk away clean, or we ride this to the badgers who owe us favors." The night held its breath, the moon climbing higher, illuminating the fragile bridge between ruin and resolution. Vance weighed it, eyes flicking to his men, the truck's open door a temptation to flee. In the end, he spat into the dust, a gesture of defeat masked as disdain, and retreated, engine roaring defiance as he peeled out. The convoy below scattered like smoke, but the core truth remained. The Reaper's reach had been clipped, their knowledge of Emily exposed but neutralized, for now. As the iron promise regrouped, bikes humming back to life, Jax felt the night's victory settle like cool dew, not in conquest, but in the upholding of honor, a promise renewed under the stars. Yet whispers lingered. Vance wouldn't fade quietly, and deeper corruptions, woven into the law's fabric, still shadowed the road ahead. Emily's ribbon in memory fluttered like a flag of hope, pulling them toward dawn's uncertain light. The first hints of dawn bled into the eastern sky, turning the canyon ridges from silver to a bruised purple as the Iron Promise riders throttled back toward the compound, engines murmuring like weary confessions after the night's tense standoff. Jax Harlan led the pack, the wind slicing through his vest with a chill that carried the faint, mineral tang of canyon dust still clinging to his skin. The harvest moon lingered low, a fading witness to Vance's retreat, but the victory felt hollow, like a throttle twist that didn't quite engage. Ricky rode close behind, his posture slumped but unbroken, the zip ties replaced by a wary trust that bound him tighter than chains. The road unspooled beneath them, headlights cutting fleeting paths through the pre-dawn gloom, while Jax's mind replayed the moment Vance's truck had vanished into the dark, taillights winking like a promise deferred, not defeated. Back at the compound, the gates parted with a familiar groan, admitting the convoy into the courtyard where floodlights hummed softly, casting long shadows over the parked Harleys like guardians at rest. The air smelled of dew-kissed earth and the lingering smoke from last night's fire pit, a comforting anchor amid the uncertainty. Lena met them at the steps, her face etched with the quiet strain of a sleepless watch, arms folded over her medic's jacket. Emily stirred from her spot on the porch swing, rubbing sleep from her eyes, the pink ribbon still pinned to her dress like a badge of quiet defiance. She padded forward as Jax dismounted, her small hand reaching up without a word, and he took it, the warmth of her palm a steady pulse against the night's cold edges. Inside the main hall, the group gathered around the oak table, now scarred with fresh coffee rings from hurried mugs. Silas poured steaming brew, the rich, bitter aroma cutting through the fatigue, while Mara lit a lantern that flickered shadows across the walls lined with club memorabilia. Faded photos of rides under endless skies, emblems of bonds forged in thunder. Ricky sat at the edge, avoiding eyes, his confession from the canyon still echoing. Vance's knowledge of Emily, gleaned from pilfered records, had been the lever to pry open their defenses. "He won't stop," Ricky said finally, voice rough as gravel. Mentioned ties to the county line, badges on payroll, turning blind eyes to Reaper runs. Dean's ambush, just the opener to clear the board. Jax leaned against the table, the wood cool under his forearms, feeling the locket's weight in his pocket, a silver echo of secrets that now demanded daylight. The club's moral compass had held in the moonlit standoff, no shots fired, truth drawn out like a blade from its sheath. But Vance's parting glare had promised retaliation, a shadow creeping from the Badlands into their sanctuary. Emily climbed onto a stool beside him, her gaze steady on the men and women who encircled her like a living wall. "Did you keep the promise?" she asked, her voice soft but piercing, cutting through the low murmurs. Jax knelt to her level, the lantern light warming her face. "We did, kid. Words over lead. That's how your dad rode." As morning light strengthened, filtering through the blinds in golden shafts, the elders pored over maps and scribbled notes, the scratch of pens a rhythmic underscore to their planning. Whispers of institutional rot surfaced. Local enforcers, once allies in grey area deals, now entangled with Reaper payoffs, shielding shipments that undercut the Iron Promise's code of quiet integrity. Silas tapped a spot near the county border, a dusty junction where highways met like crossed oaths. Vance'll hit there next. Push cargo through under cover of authority. We expose it clean or the whole line crumbles. Mara's eyes hardened, her fingers tracing the iron cross on her vest. For Dean, for her. The room nodded, a collective resolve settling like dust after a ride, binding them in the family's chosen weave. By noon, the compound thrummed with purpose. Scouts prepping bikes with muffled tools, the metallic clink mingling with the sizzle of midday stew from the kitchen, herbs and venison wafting on the breeze. Jack stepped outside with Emily, the sun baking the adobe walls into a warm haze, cacti standing sentinel along the fence line. She clutched her drawing from the night before, the ribbon-wrapped bike, and held it up, pointing to a scribbled figure on the seat. "That's you and Daddy, riding together now." The innocence of it twisted in Jax's chest, a reminder that redemption wasn't claimed in canyons, but in the small legacies passed hand to hand. He'd failed Dean once, years back, by not pressing on those Phoenix loose ends, but Emily's arrival demanded he mend it, honoring the hidden father's vow through actions that echoed without roar. Afternoon brought a visitor unannounced, a weathered sedan crunching gravel at the gates, its driver an old contact from Dean's war days, a retired operative with eyes like chipped flint. He carried a battered envelope, sealed with wax that cracked under Jax's thumb, revealing typed pages and faded printouts, evidence of the corruption, badges linked to Vance through shell accounts and midnight meets. "Dean's ghost led me here," the man said, voice low over the hum of idling engines. "He reached out weeks ago, sniffing the rot, wanted it buried if things went south, but for the kid's sake, it's yours now." The words landed heavy, unveiling the depth of Dean's foresight, sacrifices layered like onion skins, protecting not just blood, but the moral spine of the club. Jax shared the intel in the hall, the group leaning in as sunlight slanted across the pages, illuminating names and roots like revelations. Emily listened from the corner, Lena's hand on her shoulder, her wide eyes absorbing the weight without flinching. This wasn't just a feud, it was a stand against the cynicism that eroded promises, where authority twisted into chains. "We ride at dusk," Jax decided, folding the envelope, "to the junction. Deliver this to the straight badges. Let truth do the work." Murmurs of agreement rose, laced with the thrill of purpose, but Jax caught Emily's gaze. "You stay safe here. This finishes what your dad started." As the sun dipped, painting the hills in fiery hues, the convoy assembled. Fewer riders this time, a lean force of resolve rather than thunder. Jax paused at the porch, crouching to Emily's level once more, the locket now around her neck, glinting like a star. "He'd be proud," he said, and she nodded. tying a fresh pink ribbon around his handlebar, a child's seal on the oath. The engine roared to life beneath him, a vibration that thrummed with anticipation, carrying the scent of heated rubber and resolve into the fading light. Vance's shadow loomed at the horizon, but the iron promise rode toward it not in rage, but in the quiet power of upheld word, redemption unfolding 1 mile at a time. Yet as the dust rose behind them, Jax sensed the final test approaching, a confrontation where loyalties would clash like chrome on stone, forging or fracturing the family forever. The dusk sky over the Arizona Badlands deepened to a bruised indigo, the sun's last embers bleeding into the horizon like fading taillights as the Iron Promise convoy sliced through the cooling air. Jax Harlan gripped the handlebars tighter, the pink ribbon Emily had tied fluttering against his wrist like a heartbeat, its satin edges whispering against the wind-whipped chrome. The road to the county junction hummed beneath the tires, asphalt still radiating the day's heat in faint waves that distorted the distant mesas into mirages. Behind him, Silas and Mara flanked the core riders, 8 in total, lean and purposeful, their engines a subdued growl that masked the tension coiling in every chest. The envelope of evidence rode in Jax's saddlebag, its weight a tangible promise. Names, dates, ledgers exposing the web of corruption that had ensnared Badges and bolstered Vance's Reaper empire. No guns drawn, no thunderous charge, just truth as the weapon, honoring Dean's quiet code. The junction loomed ahead, a crossroads of cracked pavement and faded signs where 2 highways converged like rival oaths, flanked by a squat sheriff's outpost bathed in the harsh glow of sodium lamps. Jax signaled a slowdown, the convoy peeling off into a gravel turnout shadowed by mesquite trees, their gnarled branches scratching at the twilight like skeletal fingers. The air carried the sharp ozone tang of an approaching storm, distant thunder rumbling low as if the sky itself sensed the reckoning. Silas killed his engine first, the sudden silence amplifying the crunch of boots on stone. Straight Badges are en route. Old ally from Dean's service days, he murmured, checking his watch, its face catching a glint from the outpost lights. Mara scanned the perimeter, her silhouette sharp against the fading light, hand resting near her belt, but never drawing. Vance's scent is on this. Stay sharp. Jax dismounted, the pink ribbon catching on his vest as he pulled the envelope free, its paper crinkling softly in the hush. Memories flickered. Dean's rare laugh during a desert campfire, stories of foxholes where a man's word was the only shield against the dark. That same word had driven him to vanish from Elena's life, shielding Emily from the club's jagged edges, only for betrayal to drag it all into the light. Now, with Ricky's redemption riding shotgun in the rear, his intel the key to this meet, Jax felt the moral line sharpen. Vengeance would shatter the family. Exposure would mend it. The riders formed a loose perimeter, eyes on the road where headlights approached, not the Allies' unmarked cruiser, but a pair of Reaper bikes slicing from a side trail, engines snarling defiance. Vance led them, his truck trailing like a hulking shadow, gravel spitting under the assault. He killed the lights at the junction's edge, stepping out with that salt and pepper beard, framing a sneer, flanked by 3 enforcers who fanned out like wolves scenting blood. The air thickened, charged with the acrid bite of exhaust and the metallic undercurrent of tension. Thunder cracking closer now, a punctuation to the standoff. "Harlan!" Vance called, voice carrying like oil on water, smooth but slick. "Thought you'd slink away after last night. But here you are, playing hero with Daddy's scraps." His eyes flicked to the envelope in Jax's hand, recognition dawning with a predatory glint. Ricky tensed beside Silas, his breath ragged, but held position, a fragile testament to reclaimed loyalty. Jax stepped forward, boots deliberate on the gravel. The ribbons flutter a soft counterpoint to the rising wind. "This ends clean, Vance. Evidence inside, your payoffs to the Badges, the ambush setup, Dean's route, his life, all to cover your push." But the kid, that was low even for you. The words hung, heavy with the weight of unspoken grief, as rain began to patter, spotting the dust into dark blooms. Vance laughed, a bark swallowed by thunder, but his enforcers shifted uneasily, rifles slung low. The Straight Badger's cruiser crested the rise then, sirens silent, but lights flashing a warning blue, pulling up with a skid that sprayed pebbles. Two figures emerged, hardened deputies with clean records, Dean's old contacts, their badges glinting like oaths renewed under the storm's first veil. Chaos teetered on the edge as Vance's hand twitched toward his sidearm, lightning forking the sky in a blinding strobe that etched every face in stark relief. Jax raised the envelope, voice steady over the downpour's building roar. "Walk now, or this goes federal. Your game's up. Rotes exposed, badges turning state's evidence. Dean's promise was family, not fallout. Yours?" Mara flanked him, her presence a quiet bulwark, while Silas covered Ricky, who stepped forward, voice breaking through the rain. "It's over, Vance. I fed you lies tonight, same as you fed me poison. The records, the mole, all traced back." The confession landed like a thunderclap, Vance's face twisting from arrogance to fury, water streaming down his beard like tears of defeat. The enforcers hesitated, exchanging glances as the deputies advanced, hands open but authoritative, the storm unleashing sheets of rain that blurred lines between sides. Vance spat a curse, eyes locking on Jax with venom, but calculation won. Retaliation here meant chains, not crowns. "This ain't done," he growled, backing toward his truck, men piling in as engines coughed to life. Taillights vanished into the night, swallowed by the tempest, leaving the junction slick and echoing with runoff. The deputies took the envelope, nodding grimly. "Dean's ledger closes this chapter. We'll bury the Reaper's rot, clean." Handshakes sealed it under the relentless pour, water sluicing over leather like baptism, washing away the night's grime. The ride back to the compound cut through the storm's fury. Wipers slashing rhythmically, thunder a fading drumbeat as skies cleared to reveal stars pricking the black. Jax's vest clung heavy, but the ribbon endured, sodden yet intact, a symbol unbroken. At the gates, Emily waited under the porch light, Lena beside her, the girl's face lighting as the convoy rolled in. She ran forward despite the mud, hugging Jax's leg, her voice small against the dripping eaves. "You came back, with the promise." He knelt, rain dripping from his brow, and nodded, pulling the locket from his pocket to clasp it around her neck once more. "Kept it, kid. For him, for us." The club gathered, engines ticking cool, faces softened by the porch's glow, family chosen, scars shared, oaths renewed in the quiet aftermath. In the days that followed, the evidence rippled outward. Vance's operation crumbled under indictments, crooked badges facing trials that peeled back layers of institutional deceit. The iron promise stood firm, routes secured not by force, but by the moral clarity Dean had embodied, promises surviving tempests, loyalty weaving through loss. Emily settled into the compound's rhythm, her laughter mingling with engine roars during community rides, pink ribbons tying into pigtails and handlebars alike. Jax watched her one dawn, perched on a fence rail, as the sun gilded the hills, and felt Dean's presence in the wind, a silent nod to redemption claimed, honor as the true legacy. The road stretched endless, but with family forged in fire and ribbon, they rode on, unbreakable. Thank you for riding with us through this tale of promises and unbreakable bonds. If it stirred your soul, please subscribe for more stories of quiet courage and chosen family. We'll see you on the next horizon.